Okay, I'm going to show you an alternate method for measuring the area of something in an image using ImageJ. So I'm going to go ahead and open an image. And again, this is, these are some leaves and we want to measure the area of these leaves. And it's on this kind of light background. And as always, we've got something of known size in the image. We've got this ruler here so we can set the scale. We always do that first. So I've picked the line tool and I'm going to come and I'm going to hover my mouse over the ruler and I'm going to hit the plus on my keyboard a few times till I can zoom in. And now I'm going to draw a line of known length. And so I got that, and that's pretty square. And we know that that is 10 millimeters now because we cover 10 tick marks. So I go to Analyze, Set Scale. Known distance is 10. I know these are millimeters. I don't need to change the unit of length. And so now I've set the scale. So I hover back over the image and hit minus a few times until I can see my leaves. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to use something called thresholding. And you do this a lot in ImageJ. And you define a color threshold. And so anything below the threshold and anything above the threshold is not selected. And it allows you to use the colors or use what you see in the image to select the things you want to select. So to do this, we're going to go to Image, Adjust, and then Color Threshold. And so this dialog box pops up. And you can see already that it's sort of able to determine, what's leaf and what's not leaf. And the problem here is it's got the wrong thing selected. If you look down here, the threshold color is red. So everything that's red is what's being selected by the threshold. And that's exact opposite. We want the leaves to be the only thing selected. Well, we're going to fix that by playing with these sliders. And now there's lots of things you can play with on here, different methods. What I'm showing you is what works for me, but I encourage you to play around with this. So we're going to define what gets selected based upon the hue and the saturation and the brightness. And so hue, if you look, that's like what color the pixel is. And saturation, I'm not real sure what that is. Maybe intensity of color. I don't use saturation very much. But brightness is, are the pixels really dark or are they really light? And if you look at each of these, the little graph on top is called a histogram. And it's basically the number of pixels that have that particular hue or saturation or brightness. And so if you look at hue, there's really nothing in our image that's red or orange or yellow. You see a few pixels that are green in color. Well, that's our leaves, right? So that's what that is. But then you see there's a whole lot of pixels up here in the light bluish range. And that's the background. A lot of that is just the background, which is supposed to be white, but it's, it really looks more bluish. If you come down here and look at the brightness, you can see that, we've got a few pixels that are very dark. Again, that's probably our leaves. And lots and lots and lots of pixels that are very light. And that's probably all this light background. And so once you kind of understand that, and it'll help you understand how it's doing the threshold and how it's selecting certain pixels. Now for each of these, you see you've got a top slider and a bottom slider. And the top one controls the left edge of the threshold. And the bottom one controls the right edge of the threshold. And so if I pull that right one in, you see I've got, so the threshold there, is there's a low cutoff and a high cutoff. And so what this is doing, like if you look at this brightness, what's between these two cutoffs, that's what's being selected and painted in red. And it's all those light pixels. And you see it's ignoring our dark leaves and it's selecting all the background. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and drag this left one all the way. And you see now the leaves are selected, But also, again, all the background is selected because we've got all these white ones. You see the whole, this whole range. You can't see that left cutoff, but it's there. So let's take this right cutoff and let's exclude all those light pixels. And look at what you got there. Now we've got a pretty good selection of those leaves. And so we're selecting all the dark stuff, and most of the dark stuff is leaf. And so once you do that, you can play with these a little bit to kind of fine tune them. You can see that there are some pixels here and up here that are not leaf but are being selected. But that's okay. Little small ones like that. You see we've got, a little hole here. So maybe if I click this slider, you see how when I'm clicking, you see how that hole slowly disappears. If I click in the other direction, I'm cutting off the very, very dark pixels, and some of those are inside the leaf. So the more I cut off those dark pixels, you see the really dark ones are outside the range. They're below the threshold. And now parts of my leaves are not being selected. So I want to go ahead and open up that threshold again some more. But that's a pretty good selection of what I want to measure. Great. So now I have my leaves thresholded. Let's go ahead and measure them. I am going to, if you look, you see a couple spots right here outside the leaf, which is not a big deal, but maybe if I get rid of, those are probably lighter spots. If I kind of get rid of those, yeah, those are going to be hard to get rid of. It's fine. We're not going to worry about those really small ones. In fact, I screwed up this leaf here, so I need to click back. The most important thing is that your leaves are solidly selected. Okay, so now to measure the area of these, we want to define what's known as a region of interest, ROI. And that's where ImageJ is just going to say, we're going to tell ImageJ, don't look at the whole picture, just look at this region. So to define that region, we're going to pick the polygon tool, and we're just going to click and roughly, just make sure that you get around the leaves. And you see these small spots here, we don't want them, so we're going to kind of try to exclude them the best we can. But if you can't help, like here, we can't help but select some smaller ones, don't sweat it. The most important thing is that we've defined a region that contains our leaves now. Okay, so let's tell ImageJ, hey, that's our region of interest. That's our ROI. So to do that, we go to Analyze, Tools, ROI Manager, and we get this window that pops up. And since we've drawn a region of interest, we just hit Add. And you see it pops up. And here, that represents our region of interest. I don't know what the numbers mean. It doesn't matter. Okay, so now we want ImageJ to work only in that region of interest. So we have to select it. If you don't click on it here, ImageJ is going to work on the entire image. So make sure you select that region of interest. And now we go to Analyze and Analyze Particles. And so we get a new screen that pops up. And so what this is going to do is now it's going to look at all those thresholded areas, and it's going to measure their area. But we need to tell it, like, ignore those really small pixels. We've got a handful of pixels that are thresholded, but they're not part of the leaf. And so we look at the size here, and you see right now it's 0.01 to infinity. And so anything as small as 0.01 square millimeters is going to be counted as a particle. We don't want particles that small. We only want these very big ones. And so let's change this to, say, 50. And it'll automatically cut off and take everything larger than 50. We don't have to type in that infinity. And so this is saying ignore any selected areas that are smaller than 50 square millimeters, which ought to be about right for our leaves. And if it's wrong, we can fix it very easily. Okay, circularity I've never messed with. We want to set this to show overlay masks, so it'll show us exactly what it's measuring. And you can have several things show up. Really all we want is display results and then also clear results. That just means, if we do multiple images in a row, it's going to clear the results from the previous image. So if you get everything set like this, then hit OK, you see what it did. It identified our leaves, but it ignored those smaller ones. And each one has a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you come over here to the results, you can see we've got the area in square millimeters for each of those. And that's it. That's what we want. And so now we can do just like before. We can, edit, select all, and then copy. We can use the keyboard shortcuts. I don't have my Excel spreadsheet set up, but I could go copy them, pretend I go and paste them into my spreadsheet. All right, that's it. So now I'm going to come back over here with them selected. I hit the delete key. Do you want to delete the 4-element overlay? Yes, I do. I'm done with it. And we can move on to the next image. So now before you go on to the next image, let's clean up a little bit. You got to close this threshold color. You need to launch it separately for each image. I haven't figured out a way to do it otherwise, so just close that. We no longer want to work with this region of interest. It'll be different in every picture, so let's delete that. Now you'll notice that it still kept the shape that we defined. That's fine, but we no longer have a region of interest defined. And so now we click on this image and we go Control-Shift-O to open the next one. Now it's going to ask us, do we want to save changes because we've drawn on this image? Do I want to save those changes? No, I don't want to save them. And now here's our next image. So let's do it again. So always, first step, set the scale. So we get the line tool. We hover over the ruler. We zoom in. Let's get a line of known length. That's pretty good right there. Analyze. Set scale. That's 10 millimeters. Don't have to mess with the units. Now we hover over the image, minus, 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 minus. And we want a threshold again. Now you can see you've got some, some green smudge in that's probably going to get selected, but that's why we do our region of interest, is we can exclude that. And that's also why we set the minimum size. We can set the minimum size. And so although that might get thresholded, we can ignore it. There are ways to ignore it. So same deal as before, image, adjust, color threshold. And again, you can see that it's selecting all those really bright pixels, but we actually want the dark pixels. So I'm going to drag the left cutoff. And so you see that, we've selected from the very dark to the very light. The whole thing is selected, but let's exclude all those light ones. So now I'm dragging the upper threshold. And you see I got rid of all those light ones, and what's left? Just my leaves. And that looks pretty good. I don't know that I want to mess with that. Again, when you get close, use the little clicky things, but that's a pretty good representation of the size of those leaves. Now again, look here in between, you see a little bit of red, but we can exclude those when we analyze particles. Let's define our region of interest. We get the polygon, select an area that contains our leaves, try to leave out as much of just make your life easier if you leave out these extraneous ones. And so there we go. Come over here to the ROI Manager and add it. There's our region of interest. Now, if we don't click on this, it's going to analyze the whole thing. It's going to be screwed up. So let's click on. Now we're going to work just in our region of interest. Analyze particles. And so it's guessing at the lower cutoff. It's saying 74 up to infinity. So anything smaller than 74 square millimeters, it's going to ignore. And I have no idea if that's right, so let's just go with it. When we hit OK, you see that that didn't work. If you look, you've only got 2 things measured. It ignored these, so these must be smaller than that cutoff. And so we've only got 2 areas. So that's no good. That's no good. We got to redo it. So we come over here, we select our ROI again. We go to Analyze Particles again. And that cutoff was too big. We want it to be smaller. So let's try our 50 again. All right, hit OK. Now it's asking, do you want to save these 2 measurements? You know, we did these measurements. We don't want to save them because we're redoing it. So we don't save. And same thing. So these must be smaller than 50 square millimeters. Okay, let's do it again. Select the ROI, Analyze Particles, and you see it's got that 50 from last time, but let's change that to, say, 25. Okay, no, we don't want to save these measurements because we're redoing them. And now look, and so now we've got all 4 selected. If you look at those 2 small ones, number 3 and number 4, you see they were a little bit smaller than 50, which is why they didn't get selected last time, but they're greater than 25. And so there you go. So we've excluded the smallest ones, but we've got our 4 measurements. And that's it. And you just keep moving from image to image, and that is color thresholding. Let me know if you got any questions.